Welcome to Massive Passive Cash Flow, the podcast that guides professionals to financial prosperity. Join our community and let's start building your wealth. Here's your host, Gary Wilson.
Welcome back to the Massive Passive Cash Flow podcast. Hi there, this is Gary Wilson. I'm your host again, and we're glad to have you back. If you haven't done so, if you could please subscribe to the podcast. So it's on 30 different channels, including, Apple, iTunes, iHeartRadio, Stitcher, you name it, you got it. And while you're out there, please visit the globalinvestoragent.com website. These are the agents that we train to work with you and I, the investors. These are not typical agents. They have access to data for every single property and owner in the entire country. No stone left unturned. They know how to identify, analyze, and negotiate deals for you and I. And it doesn't cost you a dime, one dime. So go ahead and visit that website. And if you're an agent, by the way, I'm sure you're watching the news, seeing interest rates go up. This is not the time to think, gee, I wonder what I'll do. Get on there, click on the button, and get a conversation going, because if you have a license, you need to take this seriously. The investors are not only going to help you survive, they're going to help you thrive. That was my story, my history years ago. So in any case, enough of that. Let's get on to the today's subject. We got Shane Hunter and Craig Higdon on for the beautiful state of Oregon to talk about your business, how to help you properly plan it when it comes to capital, strategic planning. I mean, these are things that all business owners need to know, because the fact is you've got a product or a service that you're offering, and that's great. That's one set of skills, but running a business is a completely different set of skills, and you've got to master that too. And a lot of entrepreneurs, unfortunately, don't do that and don't take it seriously, and they struggle. So let's not struggle. Let's do things the right way, and have a good conversation here with Shane and Craig. So guys, thanks so much for joining us. I know it's early where you are, and I appreciate you taking the time to do this.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Thanks for having us, Gary.
Thank you. Yeah.
If you wouldn't mind, we've been speaking already, and I'm a huge fan of where you are. I've got agents on the team out there who, investor agents, and I've been north, south, in the middle of the state. And but tell us, how did you guys, how did you end up where you are, or how did you meet each other? Kind of give us a little context, if you don't mind.
Sure. So, I originally grew up. I'm one of the California transplants. Actually, a bit of a replant, because my grandparents were all from Oregon. And my wife and I were living in the Bay Area. She's like, I want to live out of state. So we took a tour of the whole country, and we ended up actually just right across the border. We went probably as we made as short of a trip as possible. We found ourselves in beautiful Ashland, Oregon, and that's where I got a chance to meet Shane.
Yeah. So I came there from Alaska, and then Hawaii, and then to Ashland. So
yeah.
A little bit of a triangle, but it's a good spot for sure. I definitely enjoy it.
Well, that sounds awesome. And I know a few people who actually, we never normally think of this, but they split their time between Hawaii and Oregon, and both are beautiful places.
Yeah, absolutely. That really surprised me when I moved up here, is that there's a really strong connection between Oregon and Hawaii. My wife and I were in Honolulu earlier this year. Yeah. And whenever we're in Uber, people are like, where are you from? I'm like, oh, from Portland. They're like, oh, I love Portland. I got an aunt there. I got an uncle there. I got, everyone. So.
Yeah. Well, for everyone listening, this is kind of unique, but I will tell you, I'm going to put a plug in here. If you haven't been to Oregon, you need to make that part of your bucket list. I'm telling you, it's a beautiful, amazing place. Whitewater rafting, hiking, biking, surfing. Everything you could possibly ask for. And so in any case, let's go ahead and jump into the meat of today's subject, which is helping some of these listeners really be better business people and be a good custodian for the businesses when it comes to structuring and planning. So let's start off with the capital planning, because I know a lot of people, in fact, I just had a call with somebody one of the agents who has land that's zoned to build a gas station with a liquor store, which I always find amazing, because we're trying to put a big push on things. Don't drink and drive since I was a kid. And yet we have gas stations that sell liquor, so it was kind of crazy, but he's looking for capital and he doesn't even know where to start. I said, tell Tim to set up a call with me. I'll help him get started. But what would you tell people? Like, what are the first couple of things somebody needs to really nail down when they have a beautiful idea? Maybe they have an asset like a piece of land. As far as getting that capital, how do you plan for that? How do you know who to talk to? What questions ask?
The first steps that I like to take, especially if you have an asset already, is you have to get your plan together, to get your business plan together, figure out how you're even going to make money from it. Because you can dump a bunch of money into anything, but if you don't get the ROI from it, then there's no reason to do that. You might as well have just thrown your money in the stock market, because you'll get an average of 7%, there.
Mm-hmm.
If you're going through that exercise to try to use your assets that you have, the bankers, anybody who wants to invest and provide you that capital, want that return. They want a better return than the stock market. They're taking a risk. There's a premium for that risk that they want to, hopefully receive back at some point in the future.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So you have to do the calculations. You got to get your Excel spreadsheet out and just start going through the numbers.
Yeah. It's interesting. My first time around the block with this was way back. I was still in my 20s. And one of my neighbors owned a restaurant. We were talking about a plan where we would do like a commissary. His restaurant would be the commissary, and we'd have these satellite quick stop, pit stop places where you pull in and get your meal and take off. And we went to a bank, and I was working at a bank at the time. And the guy said, well, bring me a business plan. I'm thinking like an outline you do in Word format or something. We get there, and he said, no, we need a real business plan. He said, here, I'll show you one. This thing was like a book. I went back to Lou, and I said, Lou, we've got some homework to do here, buddy, So, and you're right. It's lenders, people who lend money generally are pretty good with the money, or they wouldn't have it to lend. And they're often even lending other people's money. So it's even more imperative. So everybody listening, if Google business plan and get some different formats. If you haven't gone to college and got a degree in MIS or basic business degree, business plan means more than just a Gary Wilson one-sheet Word document. So on there, obviously, people want to see projections. And when people are looking at those things, I don't know if you have an example we can use. If somebody started a business recently, I guess people with the money are looking at this, and they're going to decide, scale of 1 to 10. Hey, this is 10. This is a 10, spot on. It makes sense. The numbers look reasonable. Versus a 1 where, oh boy, this guy's, this looks like high risk. What are the things? How do you make a business plan look like it does make sense, and it's not just your wishful thinking in your mind. It's based on actual sound. Actually, do you use other models, other examples of other gas stations to sell liquor? I mean, can you guys help people with that? Actually structuring that? Is that part of what you do, or?
That's part of some services that we offer for sure. With the business planning piece, there is a lot of research that you got to do. You have to understand what other, in this case, gas stations might be doing. You don't want to just throw numbers out there that make no sense, because a smart investor will have some experience from prior gas station owners who came to them and gave them numbers to figure out, hey, does this make sense, or is this guy just making stuff up? There's lots of market data that you need to find, you can pay for. There's lots of just demographic data in the area where you're going for to see if it's saturated with gas stations. Why build another one if the demand isn't going to be there because they're already 7,000 per square mile or whatever,
Yeah. But it's funny. I just was thinking, I've had 2 extended trips in Oregon over the years. And the first one was before the new cannabis laws. The last one was after the new cannabis laws. And I remember thinking in my mind, I'm seeing a lot of dispensaries, Bob's pot store, stuff like that. Have you been involved in that kind of thing, like helping people start those businesses? I've seen some that look unbelievably organized and structured. They're in strip malls and things like that, all the way down to the literally the wooden shack in the middle of nowhere. But I don't know anything about that. Although we sold a farm out there the last year. There was a nice, somebody bought it and grew cannabis and made a lot of money on that farm. But is there an example you can give? It doesn't have to be cannabis. Could be any business that you've somebody you help with, to figure out how much capital do they need. That's, to me, that's one of the big questions. Is yes, we need money to start a business, but how do we know how much we need? I've always built my businesses from scratch, so I never borrowed money, but was always basically guessing. I could have done a better job at guessing is what I'm saying. I didn't realize how much I was actually going to need. Is that one of the biggest challenges?
Yeah, absolutely. Just getting that number right to see how, with your projected cash burn, with your projected runway, to start actually making money, because you typically don't start just rolling in the dough right away. You're going to have some lead time to that. So being able to model that accurately, or at least realistically, to go back and say, all right, so at year 2 is where we really start pounding through and getting things going on their own. We're going to need to have enough capital to get there. Because if we can't even get there, then the whole thing will just fall apart and there's no reason to even start.
Okay.
Yeah. And one of the things that I think is often overlooked, I'm a big believer in qualitative analysis and qualitative research. While it might sound like you're going out and talking to your competition, if you're asking somebody who's done this previously, I know almost every single small business owner that I've worked with is totally willing to share their story, totally willing to share their gotchas, their pitfalls, and they'll talk about their triumphs too, believe me. So that is absolutely one of the most invaluable things that you can do, is actually just go out, talk to somebody that's doing it now. If you have that interest, if you have that passion, go find out, is it what it says on the tin? Is running this business exactly the way that it is in my mind, or are there things that are very different? Because one of the things you alluded to earlier on was the difference between having a craft and having a skill and being very good at something, and running the business that lets you do that thing over and over and over again. And finding out how closely or how differently those are aligned in the thing that you're looking to invest in is incredibly important.
Yeah, I agree. I know one thing too that I think stumps people is knowing what you need initially, the initial capital outlay to either buy a place to operate out of, or rent a place, lease a place to operate out of, buy inventory and all that. But then there's ongoing operational costs. I mean, you've got salaries, you've got business taxes, insurance, things like that. And that financial planning part, I know for me, I never could nail it completely. It was either, under guessing or over guessing, and I kind of went back and forth on that. But a lot of times it was the ongoing operational costs, where if you haven't done it before, you think you had it all figured out, but stuff just pops up. I mean, like, people a lot of times don't put a lot of emphasis on marketing, for example. And marketing is research and advertising. It's all part of the marketing. And they either don't include it, or they think, well, I'll spend a few $100s a month. Well, the reality is sometimes you need a few $1,000s a month. But how far out do generally people look for? If I'm a lender or a private lender, even looking to fund a business startup, do you want to see 1 year of ongoing operational expenses and basically income and expense, or 3 years? So what's the rule of thumb there?
I've the ones that I've been involved with have been around 3 years. 1 year pretty detailed, and then year 2 and 3 sort of maybe more consolidated. And sometimes people go out to 5 year, but at that point you're really guessing. It's kind of a crapshoot at that point.
Well, what kind of looking ahead here? Obviously, in the last couple of years, the world gone through some dramatic change. We had the pandemic, and I think it taught a lot of people, what? We really can work from home. We don't all have to be in the big office building anymore. I mean, that's just one part of it, but there's other associated impacts. I mean, so people aren't driving to the office, they're not using their car as much. They don't have to buy as many suits, things like that. But also they might have daycare. So when we're looking ahead, what type of products would you say people should be leaning towards? And maybe not even the product itself, but you look at Amazon. Amazing growth in the last 25 to probably 25 years. So they've taken their products into the digital world. Is that something you're seeing? If you could talk about that a little bit, tell us about how you think that's going to impact our economy, and how we engage in commerce. So we used to go to the store to buy product, now we can just go online and do it digitally. Is that are we just the beginning of that? I mean, I'm really curious personally, because I know a lot of people that don't even go to stores anymore. And I'm thinking, okay, is this the beginning of something even bigger? So when it comes to the digital products and services, what are your thoughts or suggestions there,
Well, I think the way I think about it is we're kind of at the end of the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
We're at the point where all of the easy things that could go online have. Now we're actually pushing into far more complicated things. I'll tell you, almost all of the auto manufacturers are looking to go direct to consumer and augmented by a really strong digital marketing and service channel, dropping cars off at people's homes. Like, oh, I just want this one in this color. It almost doesn't matter where it comes from because it's drastically cheaper than working through some of the dealership models that are working on now. Tesla, and there's a huge fight in there. I don't know how familiar you are with the way the industry works, but the difference between the manufacturers and the dealers and the power that both of them have back and forth in that industry is phenomenally complex. And all of that is mitigated and legislated on a state-by-state basis. So that is a fascinating case study for watching an incredibly complex ecosystem of relationships go digital. So auto is one of them. I don't think that's going back. I think that there's so many cost savings to be had for the distributors, and even personal things. You mentioned it, like clothes. It's so easy to just send something back that you can try it on in your own home. We're also seeing AI-powered concierge services in that space. Because you liked this and this, try these 4 things, and they'll just send it to you as part of a subscription. You can send it back, of course, but they've already moved past that first conversion point of getting the product in your hands, on your body, in your home. If you don't send it back, that's not on them. So that's a big one. And that's a really personal choice. What you wear, how you wear it, and how you build your wardrobe is something that a lot of people feel very personal about. And it's absolutely online. Food service is another big one. Mm-hmm. The food delivery, we've seen that growing over the years. And it's to the point where I don't know, either delivery or even just digitally augmented pickups at grocery stores are fantastically convenient, and it's good for the businesses because they can reduce overhead costs. It's a lot easier for them to serve just running groceries from a warehouse out to a car than it is to own a full retail environment. So really, in a lot of instances, the onus is on retail to prove why it's still worth it, because it's shifting. Now you see some of the big successes in that space. Apple, of course, pops out. Nike is another one that's doing fairly well. And those are brands and companies that live on their brand and their differentiation. Mm-hmm. If you are a commodity product of any kind or offering a commodity service of any kind, pushing through a digital channel should be your number one priority right now, because you're trying to drastically reduce those overhead costs and those service costs and work on the network effects that digital provides you in the marketing side.
Yeah. It's interesting. You mentioned cars right off the top, and I've seen I can't remember, it's Carvana or something.
There's Carvana. Yep. There's Carvana. There's a number of them. Driveway. Yep. Yeah.
It's like a big, 7-story vending machine when the cars are spinning around inside. Holy smokes. So, and in real estate too, I mean, we're seeing some interesting development, software development, hardware development coming down the road where people like the gaming technology. They put a helmet on where they can see things 3D and virtually, and they control what they're doing in this game where they're playing other people virtually. Well, same thing can be done in real estate. You can literally walk through a house that could be 700 miles away, and as long as everything's mapped, you can see everything. And now you can't see behind the walls, obviously, with that kind of technology. You still have an inspector. I guess that will change, but I just think the business in real estate is also going to be evolving. It's already started with a company called EXP. I mean, they took it online. The operations went online. The service is still out in the field, but there's technology I'm seeing and hearing behind the scenes that involve gaming technology that's already existing to allow people to, be in 3 feet of snow up in Alberta, and
check out that Phoenix. That Pool in Phoenix. See how it's looking in April.
Yeah.
Matterport is one of the big companies that does the 3D mapping. They're really focused on kind of getting the camera and the mapping technology. I think it's built on the Unreal Engine that originally came out of video gaming, but now that's pushing into the 3D space as well. And it's interesting. I often think about when trying to figure out if an industry is going to go more kind of digital, if they're going to go more kind of technology focused. I think about a couple professions that are the real kind of pinnacle of what humans do, like, architecture, brain surgery, things like that. And sure, maybe you'll never be able to replace an architect or a brain surgeon, but the technology in such a way is augmenting the most successful of those professionals and letting them scale the work that they do, so that the overall industry is going to find, there's downward pressure on the quantity of people that are needed to do a brain surgery, or to, design a complex building, or, you look at some of the sports stadiums that are coming in now. The architecture teams and the project management teams that are required to build that are so much smaller. It would have taken teams of people, dozens of teams of people to do that in the mid 1900s. And now, you get down to a project and design team of like 20 people, because the coordination that's allowed through digital channels and technology, and the ability to kind of modularize the work that you're doing, that's going to happen everywhere. That is happening everywhere.
Yeah. We'll be right back with the Massive Passive Cash Flow podcast after I invite you to Monday Night Live. Every Monday night, 7 p.m. Eastern, I teach a class without fail for you on subjects ranging from flipping to buying rentals, managing rentals, wholesaling, commercial, creative purchasing techniques, analyzing properties, identifying properties, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of subjects. And if you are a licensee, if you have a real estate license, you should definitely tap in, because there are a lot of investor agents also in the class. Many of them are on the global investor agent team. So you can learn from them, as well as from me, how to actually work with investors correctly and profitably. All right, we'll see you Monday night. The link is in the show notes. Go ahead and register. We'll get right to the Massive Passive Cash Flow podcast. Yeah, I agree. There's a lot of amazing products like just in housing, the tiny houses, small houses, and they come on the back of a flatbed truck, and you lower them down, and they lift up the top part, the sides fall out, they fold open again, and in a day you've got
they bolt them up, and
it's amazing. And I want to tell people, if you're a real estate agent listening to this, don't be afraid, be happy, because I remember when the MLS went online, everybody thought, well, we're no longer going to need jobs. I thought, I don't think so. I think it's going to make your job easier, and sure enough, it has. So I do see a trend in real estate agency where there'll be more strict requirements. The barriers of entry will be raised, the bar will be raised, because historically almost anybody could get a realtor's license, but there are states, even provinces in Canada, where the requirements now are several hundred hours of learning, like a regular degree program. And they do have degree programs in real estate now. So I think you'll have probably fewer agents in the future, but more qualified, more informed, more educated agents. And the technology is going to allow them to do a lot more. So I would say if you're an entrepreneur, be happy about these. I mean, look at ships and horses and trains. Is when the train came out, people thought, well, we don't need horses anymore. We still have horses,
Yep.
And when the automobile came out, they said we don't need trains anymore. Like, well, we'll still have trains, So
well, and the way, when I talk to customers and clients about this, is that there's a continuum of service that you can offer. Some of it can be highly automated and digital. The other side is completely white glove and personal. Look at how what you're doing lives on that continuum. If there are tasks that you can push down to that automated side, do it, because that lets you do the highly high touch, high personal, the stuff that we all thrive on every day as humans. You can do more of that because you can automate all the stuff that your customers don't want to necessarily talk to you if they're just updating something in a file. They can do that online. You don't have to talk to them. Maybe some people do, but in general, it lets you push a lot of your tasks onto an online platform while being more human with your customers. You can focus on the time you have together. And that's the thing that's the optimism that I find in it, is that it actually gives us a chance to kind of break free from a lot of the minutia that we used to do and focus on the relationships that make sales, that make connections, that help you build business, that help you understand how to get the most out of your investments.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you what you just touched on. Let's expand on that a little bit, that like human-centered design. So the world's changing, people are evolving. I mean, the body of knowledge, somewhere, I forget the stats, like it doubles every 2 years or something, what's the scope of knowledge available to us as humans. I just think that's fascinating. And there are people I know as we age too. I know my parents, I thank goodness I still have both my parents, but they're starting to kind of wind down. They're like, we're happy. We don't need all the stuff that you guys have in their 50s and 30s and 20s. So there's that human component of, but for the human race in general, I mean, if we could expand on the human-centered design part of that, and what do users, what do consumers have to know or should know or think about? So you got the business owner and you've got the consumer,
Yep.
So yeah.
So I think this gets back to the advice I offered early on when doing some of that capital and business planning. And human-centered design is really about understanding who needs what out of whatever you're offering, whatever system you're creating, whatever business you're making, and getting really down to the point of putting yourself in their shoes so that you aren't just solving the problem as it exists in your head, but you're solving the problem as it exists in your customers or your clients' reality. Mm-hmm. And this goes beyond just a business context. You can actually think about it in all sorts of ways. You can use human-centered design to have better conversations with your children. We have all found ourselves in those situations where it just feels like a dead end. But if you flip your head around and flip your thinking around, like, what is my kid really trying to get out of this situation? Mm-hmm. And what are some other things that can provide that? So using human-centered design is about that. And I think especially for startups, and especially for entrepreneurs, it is really easy, and especially, like tech-focused entrepreneurs as well, it's really easy to confuse the solution with the problem, because we can build all sorts of solutions, but making sure that they help somebody solve a problem and that they meet a goal, that's where the value is. That's where businesses capture value. Yeah. So I absolutely believe in getting out and having that one-on-one conversation, creating those feedback loops that let you talk to people that you've had success with previously, or that, maybe you haven't had success with. You can talk to your worst enemies and find out like why they hate you. Like that gives you the feedback that you need to take the steps to make the changes. And if someone wasn't a great customer once, you can find out why. I mean, maybe they're not a great customer for dozens of reasons. And if that's the case, then, hey, there's a market and an audience for everyone. But if they are in a demographic that you care about, and for some reason you're not connecting, asking them why and getting that feedback and creating that ability to make those iterative changes to your business over time is essential. Yeah.
It's funny, you touched on something that's probably been around since the dawn of computer technology, hardware and software. One of my first jobs was working for a bank. I was in the IT department, so I wrote software, operating systems. And the department that used our software, we actually called them users. So one of the first things, my boss was very forward thinking. She was brilliant. She said, first off, we're going to stop calling them users. We're going to start calling them clients. And she said, another thing we're going to do is when you come on board this team, we're not going to start your coding right away. We're going to send you over there to work for the client department for a couple of weeks, a couple of months to really find out what it is they're doing daily. What's their interaction with their clients out in the field, people who have checking and savings accounts, and really learn what they need and what they want, and just get involved at the conversational level. And sure enough, one of the most brilliant things I've ever seen. So we came back, then we were writing software, not because we were, our pride is, I'm going to write this software that's going to be the slickest thing you've ever seen. It's going to be efficient and blah, blah, blah. But it didn't really meet the user's needs or client's needs. Yep. So we would write in terms of what they needed. And that made a huge difference. So that bank, by the way, is PNC Bank. And
Oh, sure.
they're one of the biggest banks in the country now. We've helped them grow because of that philosophy. So same thing for everybody listening here. I don't care if you're a dentist with a 1 or 2 or 3 practices, you can do the same thing,
It does. Yeah, it doesn't matter. This is applicable everywhere. And it's so amazing because you'll find little things that you had taken for granted that your customers or your users or your clients haven't. We did some research for a customer recently, and they were very much saying like, oh, we're real smart. We know our customers. I'm like, okay, that's great. And so we went through and we were walking through a product that we were building for them, and every person we talked to, we had a small set up front. They were like, okay, listen, you can talk to these 5. Like, okay, we can talk to them. And 201, they were like, oh, this is great. This is exactly what the industry needs. And they're like, okay, cool. Would you use it? Or like, oh, no.
Yeah.
No, we would never use it. It's not for us. It's for someone else. I'm like, whoa, okay. And we get that out of all of them. And we go, why? They're like, well, we've got all these other systems in place. We've got all these other things that are going on. And, like, we're not going to change all that for this. We're going to keep using your existing services that are incredibly labor intensive and very customer support heavy. Right. So we took that back to them and they're like, okay, cool. Now you can go talk to 20 more people. Like, we need to figure out what it's going to take and who the right people are to get into this system. Because I think like every business owner knows that your business doesn't exist at one point in time. It grows and changes over you as you grow and change and as the markets grow and change. Mm-hmm. So really, when you're trying to build the best business, you're really trying to think about how can you build the best process or portfolio that allows you to grow and change the way that you want to and that aligns with your vision. Because it's that process that allows you to adapt and adopt. So, maybe if you want to do something big, you start with something small or a certain segment of an overall industry, because you need to learn what's on the ground. You need to learn those boots on the ground truths that allow you to then go through and make the changes needed over time to get where you want to go. If you try and, go big all at once, you're working on a lot of assumptions. It requires a lot more capital. You're moving into an incredibly complex and mature industry, probably, that you're trying to make changes in, and the wrong changes, they'll, and how do you make those when you make the wrong changes? It's not necessarily failure. It's failure, but as long as it's a learning failure, then you can keep growing and keep modifying as long as you know where you're trying to get to.
Yeah. It's funny. I just was thinking about the average real estate investor, and I'm an investor myself. We have a lot of listeners who are investors, and for those of you listening, you already do invest in real estate. You do have a business. You've got inventory. Your properties are your inventory. Your tenants, they're your clients that choose to pay you every single month because you offer them a product. So you've got to think about this and think about what's happened just in the last few years in the world of real estate. I mean, you had moratoriums on being able to evict people that couldn't pay rent. They couldn't pay rent because their jobs were reduction in jobs because of their stores were shut down, things like that. So how did you react to it? What laws were put into place? What laws were changed, as a result of that? So this is very relevant, very pertinent. And if you're just starting off in investing, I would tell you, think of the structure, your business structure first before you buy the first property. Who's your accountant? Who's your attorney? Where are you going to go get the money? Who's going to give you the capital? The bank, the private lender. All these things you to figure out in advance before you ever go sign on the dotted line and buy a duplex. Matter of fact, let's kind of go back to the beginning of the interview and start back with the small business. So in my opinion, this is just my opinion, every business, doesn't matter if it's a real estate investor or the agent or the dentist or the doctor, the chiropractor, everybody has those common traits, the common, inventory, clients, income, expense, profit, loss, accounting, lending, financing, bookkeeping. So if we could go back to the beginning of that, like a small business strategy, what would people like? Say I called you up, I listened to the podcast and I called you up and I said, hey guys, I am getting ready to launch something. I retired from my corporate job after 40 years. I don't even know where to start. What's my basic strategy? Is that too big of a question to wrap things up, or?
I mean, that is a pretty big question. The first thing I would say is, what's your passion? What are you interested in? I mean, if it is real estate investing, then that's an answer to go down. But if it could be anything, maybe the person really wants to get into a certain nonprofit or something like that and help a certain class of people. There's all kinds of ways to go at that point. But like you were saying, all these small businesses, all these other businesses as well, they have basically sort of three things that they're sort of trying to do all the time. If you boil down all the strategic planning that's ever been done in the entire world, they're either focusing on growth, something with marketing, advertising, getting more people, getting their product out there, getting a new product out there, focused on operations, either becoming more efficient or figuring out how to set processes in place to create something similar every single time, or they're focused on people, which is their employees. What sort of positions do they need to be successful in their business, so they can sort of push work down and focus on the things that they need to focus on instead of all the minutia that we've sort of talked about before. So it sort of boils down to one of those three things in any sort of strategic plan that a business would have, and figuring out how to sort of focus your energy in the next thing that'll move the needle the most is essential, because you can be pulled in 700 different directions, and we constantly are as business owners. And figuring out, all right, that is important, but not urgent right now. So I'm just going to hold off on that. I'll put that to the side and focus on these other things that potentially will move the needle the most and get me in the direction that I want to go. Because sometimes you see a shiny object over there and you think, maybe I'll go chase that for a little while, but that distracts you from the real purpose in the business that you're going for. So getting that direction, that strategy in place, that plan to figure out, all right, this is what I'm going to do. This is how I'm going to focus my time, because your time is absolutely finite. You don't just get to do whatever you want all the time if you're trying to grow a business in this direct way. And tracking that, making sure you're doing the things that you need to do. And if an idea pops up, you plan that out next. And just going forward in that direction.
Yeah, it's funny. Entrepreneurs are famous for, whatever pops up. They go to a conference and there's 20 people there with the new whiz bang idea, and they go, that's exactly what I needed. But so keeping that focus, staying in your lane, and say, what, I've got my plan. I've got to do my three things. When I get to that next level, then I'll open up the valve again and look and see what else is out there at that next level. So for people, how can people learn more about what you're doing? Understand you're doing a beta, you're looking for participants. So this could be a great way for people to participate with you. And I'm guessing work hand in hand. I mean, can they go to the website, or what are the next steps here?
Yeah, absolutely, Gary. Our everything that you've heard, all of the thinking that came from, that you've heard throughout this conversation is what we've put into BetterPlan.work. And BetterPlan.work is how small business owners and entrepreneurs kind of develop those long-term plans and the planning skills that are needed for them to grow their businesses while they're keeping the lights on. We built it for craftspeople that are focused on a profession that now find themselves as business owners as well, but also for people with a portfolio of projects. How do they stay on track and keep focused? And how do they make the right choices on how they invest their time and track their success?
Okay.
We all know about the tyranny of the urgent. We were talking about the shiny thing, and really we're trying to help people focus on actually just taking the steps that are needed that will cause them to grow, to help them make the changes for the growth in the operations and with the people that they have that they need to rely on to grow their business.
Okay. And that's BetterPlan.work. So BetterPlan.work, WORK.
That's it. That's us. Yeah. And
Yeah.
like you mentioned, we're looking for beta testers. We've had a number of people in and through the tool, really excited. But like I was saying earlier, it's all about that feedback loop and that learning. We want to be able to build the best tool that helps the most people, because we know how big of a challenge this is. We've all experienced this. If you're an entrepreneur, you know how easy it is to get pulled off track. And being able to take those concrete steps and make those changes and those actions in your business is exactly what's needed to grow. We also know that there's a million different resources out there, places to find information. And so what we really tried to do is create and distill some of our thinking down in it, as well as a tool. There's lots of project management tools out there. There's lots of list tools that are just kind of like a blank slate. What we really tried to do is give you some frameworks around making the right kind of changes and knowing the steps and actions that are needed to go forward and help build your business.
Yeah. Well, what's really interesting is I know there'll be some folks, I've heard this before. I've had 7 businesses, and I'll meet with people and they say, well, my business is different. I've heard it so many times. And I try to explain to them, say, you may have a different product or service. That's absolutely true. And you've got a great idea. It's unique, it's innovative, and it solves a problem. However, we all have the same fundamentals. We all need to have bookkeeping and accounting. We need to borrow money or bring partners in and make them capital partners, equity partners, profit share partners. All that stuff is true for every business. Those fundamentals, those rules or those laws. It's like nature. The sun's going to rise in the east and set in the west. And same thing with business. You're going to have to go through a certain set of steps, no matter what your products or services. So bear in mind, if working with Craig and Shane, they have different backgrounds. You get 2, really, instead of just one person, you get 2 people. And I love the idea of being able to work with a group of guys at the beginning stages when I was first starting off. Not through 30 years later. So because I teach this stuff too, and what you guys are doing, I mean, for everybody listening, this consider this a plug, but spot on, accurate. It's exactly what you need. Don't take chances. Don't guess. I mean, a lot of failures in this world, people hear about all the statistics. So many businesses fail in the first 5 years. It's usually because it's things that you could have avoided, you didn't avoid by simply talking to the right people, getting the right advice. So go to BetterPlan.work, check it out. And guys, I really appreciate you being on board. If you have any final words of wisdom or thoughts to share with people.
Sure. Yeah, I just believe in yourself, learn what your customers, your clients, and your audience care about, and anchor your business on what makes you different and helps them the most. Yeah.
Awesome.
And I would say, the numbers aren't the most important thing. They're kind of everything. That profitability and cash flow management, like you were talking about before, that is what really kills small businesses. Yeah. So making sure you understand your numbers is critical.
Yeah. Well, we'll tell you too. I know in the beginning, I green as they get, obviously, like everybody else when they first start. But now, having done this for a while, and I've had other people tell me the same thing. Once you get used to doing these things, and you've had 2 or 3 or 4 businesses, you learn to read a financial statement like you read a book, and the numbers tell the story. The numbers don't lie. Just you focus on the numbers, and so what you said is absolutely true. It distills down to something that's measurable and trackable, and it's the numbers. The numbers don't. Whatever you're telling the IRS, that's what people want to look at. They don't care if you say, well, I'll put my car in there too. Alyssa. Doesn't matter. The numbers are what the numbers are. So any case, for everybody listening, I really encourage you to go there. Go to BetterPlan.work, check it out. And we'll see you on the next podcast. By the way, we appreciate you being part of Massive Passive Cash Flow Method and the podcast. If you could, speaking of podcast, if you could leave a review, that would be very good. We really appreciate your reviews, especially for this one. It's the currency that makes the podcast business go around, because you don't have to pay for it. It's free. We love to do it for the community, but it's the reviews that really make things go around. If you could do that, that'd be awesome. Check out the website, BetterPlan.work, and while you're out there, make sure, particularly you agents out there, go to globalinvestoragent.com, click on the button, learn more, because the market is changing. And this is one way to not just survive but thrive. You gotta stay plugged in and be engaged and be part of this community. It's growing. It's the fastest growing team in the country. Those investor agents are in over half the states, outproducing NAR by a factor of 2 to 1. Yeah, that's a big number. So in any case, thank you everyone for participating, particularly Shane and Craig. Thank you again very much. And we will see you on the next podcast.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Massive Passive Cash Flow. Be sure to go to realestatewithgarywilson.com to join our community and start building wealth today.